Hi everyone, I am recording a presentation that I made at the Arab Community Centre of Toronto's Josoor conference, which was a project related to digital inclusion, and my keynote presentation was about bridging digital inclusion. So today I'm going to speak to you about the importance of digital inclusion and what we need to do to get there in our sector. Let's start with the problem we need to solve, digital exclusion. What happens if we don't work towards digital inclusion? What does that mean for newcomers? Digital exclusion refers to those that lack access to technology and foundational digital skills training, which locks many people out of opportunities with considerable cost to them and, of course, to our wider society. The digital divide refers to the economic, educational, and social inequalities between those who have devices and online access and those who do not or don't know how to use them. The digital divide for newcomers includes limited or shared access to digital devices and platforms, but can also be more complex, made more complex by low literacy in English or in their own languages, a disconnect between devices newcomers predominantly use, the smartphone, and how information is shared via requiring larger screens or multiple windows. And digital equity also intersects with other equity and social justice issues. These are digital inclusion issues that are a bit below the surface and require us to spend time discovering, but are as equally important to address as devices and internet connections. So digital literacy and critical thinking skills are necessary to participate effectively in today's world. I don't think there's anyone who would argue with that. And one definition of digital literacy is the skills associated with using technology to enable users to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information, and developing digital citizenship and the responsible use of technology. So, reading books online or using your phone to post on Facebook or to send a text is not what we're focused on when we mean true digital literacy. The goal is higher. Like settlement, it's full participation and inclusion in society. So where are we at now? Since the pandemic, in our sector, we have come to a better understanding of the multidimensionality of digital inequality. Digital inclusion needs to consider different social and situational contexts. Digital inequality also happens to settlement workers, not just to newcomers. It's an issue in our organizations as well. And we can't solve this problem alone. So, as a sector, we've come to a better understanding of what multi-dimensional digital inequality is, as well as the fact that we cannot do this alone as individual agencies. So there are systemic issues that exist in our sector, not just with clients, but also within our organizations and for settlement practitioners. Building inclusion and equity has always required system and organizational change. This is no different when it comes to technology. In most cases, our conversation shouldn't actually start with technology tools, but how technology might help address and create inclusion and equity. So if digital exclusion is the problem, what do we mean by digital inclusion? Digital inclusion refers to the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. So a definition I find useful from the US-based National Digital Inclusion Alliance is digital inclusion requires intentional strategies and investments to reduce and eliminate historical, institutional, and structural barriers to access and use technology. Key elements of digital inclusion include affordable, high-speed, reliable internet service, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, access to digital literacy training and high-quality technical support, applications and online content that is designed to enable and encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration, and building the capacity of the nonprofit service sector to provide supports and digital services. It's a big topic, but it's one that's important to our sector. Digital inclusion is something that has been highlighted during our work on digital transformation over the past years, and as I mentioned, it's not separate from other challenges of equity and inclusion and must be seen in that broader context. So to discuss solving the problem of digital inequality, I'm going to start with organizations and then I'll discuss the staff perspective. So I want to introduce the idea of the Digital Settlement Agency. It's made up of many things, but it also ultimately must be centered on newcomers, as well as our sector values of access, anti-oppression, equity, and inclusion. And at the core, at the center, again, is this notion of newcomer-centric data, where we're creating a seamless client settlement experience journey. Professional development is when we're thinking about people in our sector, in our context, where we're building a competencies framework for our work, including knowledge mobilization and transfer. And this is where I'll discuss a digital navigator model in a little while, but it means building your own digital literacy skills and competencies as well. Thinking about processes, this is where we're talking about digital and data maturity and risk frameworks. which refers to cybersecurity mainly. These are frameworks that exist that we can not only build on, but learn from, borrow, customize, and implement in our sector. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, but it's essential that our work needs to keep newcomers and you in the sector safe and secure online. Technology in our case needs to be tempered with digital inclusion and equity. Centering inclusion in digital transformation is part of our work now, and this needs to align with our sector values. When we're thinking about being ready, this is where we're talking about baselines in hybrid service delivery, where we have a common minimum standard or floor of infrastructure and competencies that no agency and no individual should fall below in our sector. We can certainly exceed those baselines, and we should strive to, but at their core, we all should have access to build those baselines. And when it comes to investing in all of this, I like to use what Alan Broadbent from the Maitrey Foundation called the 3 I's of immigrant integration: intentionality, instruments, and investments. So we need to be strategic. We need to be intentional about what we're doing. We need to have the right instruments, tactics, or technologies in order to address what we're being intentional about. And we need investments in those instruments and in those strategies in order to make it happen. And data is key to all of that. Again, in this model, I'm putting that at the center and calling it the newcomer. It's really being newcomer-centric, fully understanding newcomers and the communities that we serve in order to create that seamless, accessible, and equitable newcomer settlement journey. Understanding newcomers makes the technology and service intervention decisions much easier and more effective. They have to be part of our conversations about digital transformation. And all of this means power sharing and decision making, where newcomers are included in any development and implementation processes when it comes to services and technology, and where we should not assume technology expertise amongst the people we serve, but we also shouldn't assume a lack of knowledge or experience. We need to be transparent with newcomers about the data that we're collecting, how it will be used, how long it will be kept, and how they can access it. And we need to use data-informed decision-making carefully and be aware of the biases in our own data and in the data we might be using from elsewhere. We need to be able to make the aggregate outcome and service delivery data from our work available to newcomers and our communities. There are excellent equity-focused data governance frameworks out there, including Indigenous data sovereignty frameworks that we can use, borrow, and replicate in our work, which means we have some work to do. So in all of this, focusing on the individual, the settlement practitioner, what is your role? At our core, we've always worked in, but now we are formally moving towards a hybrid or blended service model. This hybrid or blended service model is made up of a combination of in-person as well as online or remote service delivery, in real time and not real time. This means there's really a no wrong approach or no wrong door approach for clients. It's an accessible and equitable model that's flexible and customized. It means both in-person and digital or remote services, sometimes with the same client. In some cases, you may have fully in-person clients, in others fully virtual. In reality, again, this isn't new. You've been providing hybrid service delivery for a long time, well before the pandemic, but we have the opportunity to formalize it now. So how do we get there? A hybrid approach requires thoughtful, intentional planning, new approaches to service design, and shifts in how we work in our skills. So what does that look like at the individual level? And it means a shift in your role. Over and above your existing roles, there are also potentially new roles or new jobs, but it's also increasingly becoming part of your role, which I alluded to earlier, the idea of the digital navigator. So the future of the frontline worker's job certainly comes up in this conversation as a point of anxiety, a fear of being replaced by technology, and I don't think your job is at risk. It's evolving, but you are more important than ever before. And as we look to the future, we can and should drive the change that is happening and ensure it aligns with our sector's core values, as well as the type of work we want to be doing and how we want to do that work. In your work, you play a key role in systems navigation. That's a lot of what settlement is. And like settlement work, as a digital navigator, you help newcomers navigate digital systems. So instead of employment, health, housing, or community systems, here we're focusing on digital literacy systems. Digital navigators are trusted guides, and digital navigation services include providing help to access affordable internet access, help getting devices, building technical skills, and support for people as they're learning new software or new apps. The digital navigator in our context helps provide digital literacy skills orientation or training for newcomers. They're also an advocate and support person who educates and onboards newcomers so they can make informed decisions about how they use technology. So for example, from a privacy and confidentiality perspective, what does that look like in service delivery? And this help is provided in person, over the telephone, but it can also be over email, texting, digital messaging, video chat, and other communication methods that work for newcomers. Additionally, digital navigators play an important role finding and making referrals to programs and helping facilitate newcomer enrollment in digital literacy classes, workshops, upskilling or learning opportunities, critical services, or simply helping people navigate community resources and services. And like settlement work, digital navigators follow up with newcomers to track progress and ensure goals have been met. And so, as I mentioned, it's a new layer of systems navigation that we all must become more knowledgeable about. It is important that frontline workers learn to be substantially knowledgeable about digital devices and platforms and prepare for digital transformation. It sounds a lot like settlement work. Like the hybrid model, you were already a digital navigator before the pandemic, and many of you have become digital navigators now. If you run a workshop on how to use LinkedIn for job search, digital navigation. If you support someone to download and complete a government form, that's digital navigation. Over the past years, if your organization provided support to newcomers around devices, internet connections, or digital literacy training, that's digital navigation. Our question is whether the digital navigator model is something we want to formalize and integrate into our work with newcomers. My suggestion is yes. And a recent report on digital navigators in the United States helps us understand why that's so. They looked at how helpful digital navigators have been. They interviewed the leaders of more than 40 digital navigator programs and conducted a nationwide survey of over 1,500 digital navigator users. And what they found is important for us to keep in mind. 66% of those users overcame adoption barriers and now have an internet connection and a device that they can use. 86% felt that they strengthened their digital skills, and 80% felt more confident or safer using the technology. So it's a model that works, and it can work for us. Hopefully your organization applied for this kind of role or one like it in the digital support services stream in the recent IRCC call for proposals. I want to broaden back out a little bit, then take a look at some practical steps you can take to make sure your services are digitally inclusive by being intentional. So by being intentional, we want to focus on assessing whether your client is ready for hybrid services and whether you are. So what digital capacity do you need in order to do this? And what digital capacity do your clients need or supports in order to access your hybrid or online services? And by access, we're talking about getting into that hybrid service. And that requires the hard side of things, so the hardware, the software, internet access, the digital literacy skills, but also the policy or the softer side, right? Ensuring that everyone has an understanding of how we're going to do this. Are your cameras going to be on or off when you're in video meetings? What are the attendance expectations? What's the variability and flexibility between in-person and online, for example? How will these services be accessed? How do we adapt our services and our tools for hybrid service, right? So how are we creating resources to help newcomers access online? And how are we adapting our services for in-person and the mix between the two, right? Within hybrid, there are many modalities. The most common are probably blended, flipped, and high flex being the actual same time in-person and online and real time. And the resources needed for both of those, for all of those modalities, can be quite different, but there are baselines around technology as well as how we serve. So the next point about serving is how do we manage the hybrid service and how we interact with clients. And a lot of that is the soft skills. And we talk a lot about this in the sector recently because people feel that they have the hard technical skills, but the softer skills of facilitation and engagement and getting people engaged in an online session is still eluding them. So we want to make sure that we are building those competencies in so that the interactions and engagements are real in online as they are in person. So that's facilitation, how you manage groups, how you set up the digital environment, and how you manage that service mix to make it engaging throughout the lifespan of a service interaction. So at the practical level, we also need to start consistently asking newcomers questions to help identify what devices they're using, how they self-assess their digital literacy, and what they want to learn. So these kinds of questions can help us practically center our digital equity and inclusion in our work. So questions like what devices are they using? What's their primary device? Who has access to or manages these devices in their household? And who doesn't have access to a device at all? What kind of internet connection do they have? Is it fast enough for a video conference? How do they assess their own digital literacy? Ask them what they can do with technology and what they want to do with technology. And then in terms of service delivery, expanding the idea of how we communicate with them. So how do they want to communicate with you as service providers? Right now, a lot of service providers ask for things like email address and phone number, not even necessarily making the distinction whether that phone is a cell phone or a landline. But we can get into things like, would you like to communicate with us via SMS texting, via WhatsApp, Telegram, WeChat, Facebook Messenger, etc., etc. And you can do this informally in conversations or more formally through surveys and at the point of intake or needs assessment. We all need to be incorporating newcomer digital literacy into program and organizational intake and needs assessment processes. Start by simply expanding the questions you ask about their contact information. Like I mentioned, ask about smartphones, ask about cell phone numbers, ask about preferences when it comes to communication. And by collecting this information and asking these questions, we learn more about newcomers, their digital access, as well as their digital and information preferences. And while you may not be able to act on all of what you learn right away, as you collect the information, you're going to identify trends in hard data and get evidence that you can use that will inform your digital service design, the ways you communicate, and the resources you need to invest in. So imagine if you serve 12,000 newcomers a year. After 3 months of collecting this information, you have 3,000 points of data that you can give to your board, to your funder, that will help determine what you need to do next in some of your investments and learning. So 80% of our clients tell us they want to communicate using WhatsApp. That has significant impacts in the devices that you're using in your organization and the channels that you use. Maybe 60% use their phone as their primary communication device. What does that mean for how you're crafting your sessions and your interactions with those newcomers? 80% want SMS or text updates instead of email, and so on. So serving and communicating with people in the way they want to be served and communicated with is essential, and we need to figure that out. So this information can also help you to start creating digital literacy action plans with newcomers to help you understand what skills they need to learn in order to, at the very least, access your services, but also beyond. And creating a digital literacy action plan captures your newcomer clients' digital learning goals and what they need to do to achieve them. So you can use it to help figure out also what digital literacy supports are needed to help them learn these skills. And you don't have to start from scratch. Resources, training, digital literacy materials have been specifically created by and for immigrant and refugee serving organizations to use with newcomers. This includes comprehensive newcomer digital literacy assessments, online courses to prepare newcomers to access online classes and services more effectively, digital literacy and online security curriculum that you can bring into your programs, and more. What else can you do? Other digital literacy support options include working in partnership with local organizations to create a digital divide inventory that outlines programs where community members can access low and no-cost devices and internet connections. You can offer support yourself in your organization. In some cases, your organization may have set up a device or hotspot lending library during the pandemic, and you may be continuing that today. Or maybe you offer digital literacy or onboarding orientation and training. And increasingly, you will be doing that with funding from IRCC and others. When it comes to digital skills, there are also facilitated and self-directed online resources that you can access and direct newcomers to. There are hundreds of toolkits, very specific, how to use Microsoft Word, how to use WhatsApp, how to download a file, how to upload a file, guides, video resources, including in different languages that you can simply replicate and incorporate in your work. And sharing what you create is important too. We need to cultivate a culture of collaboration across the sector where useful materials that have been funded and created, like what you're seeing on the screen now, are shared and made accessible to all. So working towards digital inclusion ultimately means building inclusive practices and building our anti-racism, anti-oppression, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and justice into our service design, including our digital service design. So building digital inclusion into our programming means creating space to collaborate, come together, co-design with newcomers, and share resources and tools with both staff and newcomers. It means understanding newcomers as well as service provider perspectives and bringing them all into that conversation. So someone wrote once that no technology project is complete without a social worker, because social work excels at understanding the entire system while also understanding the needs of the individual. In our sector, no technology project should be considered complete without frontline workers and newcomers present, for the same reasons. We must center staff and newcomers in all technology-related planning and decision-making. So this can feel overwhelming, right? I want to leave you with some tangible next steps to work on for the rest of the year. By the end of 2024, you should start to become more confident in your digital skills and know how to access additional support for yourself. You should be aware of user-centered service design and how to access and be supported in identifying opportunities for new services and for innovation in the work that you're doing by using that data. And by being aware of the importance of data and intelligence, you should be able to access the information you need to be able to measure performance and outcomes, predict and anticipate future demand, and make well-informed decisions. Now, this sounds intimidating, but what it really means is going back to that idea of developing deep knowledge of your newcomer clients and communities and factoring that into service and program design and delivery. As one UK-based municipality put it, to ensure we design and deliver the right digital and technology services, we will design our services around the needs of the people using them and put digital at the heart. The idea is that services developed around the needs of the people using them. They're figuring that out with those people and understanding them deeply. And you can do this because you have to do this in other parts of your work. So it's not new, but we just need to apply that same thinking, that needs assessment and an asset assessment to digital. You also need to receive data protection and cybersecurity training and become knowledgeable and expert in cybersecurity. This isn't a one-and-done exercise either. This is lifelong learning because the threats continue to change, especially with AI. So you need to start that process if you're not already doing it. And if your organization isn't investing in it, then you need to be figuring some of this stuff out for yourself so you understand privacy, confidentiality, encryption, things like that. So you're making good choices and helping your clients make good choices around how to communicate online. And then you have to start embracing your role as a digital navigator, which means also knowing where to access digital literacy information for your clients and share what you create back to the sector so that it can be built on and shared back to you. So if you take anything away from this whole conversation, it's that we cannot do equity work without considering digital. And we must ground our digital work with an equity lens, which means anti-racist, anti-oppressive, inclusive, safe, with accessible choice and access based on newcomers' wants and needs. So I hope this has been useful, and I thank you.